Caution. The AJ and Quill show contains D&D content and is intended for a D&D audience. And, besides that, they're really weird. Hi everyone, welcome to Meta Adjacent, your stop for player tactics in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. As always, I'm Professor AJ, and with me is my enigmatic partner, Quill the Dragon. Say hi, Quill.
Greetings, puny humans. Prepare to absorb the knowledge Quill will dispense with his mighty jaws.
Well, that bell means class has started. Pull out your notebooks and let's get going.
So what are we covering today?
The star of Growing Pains, Phenom, Rhesus, and The Blind Spot, Ashley Johnson is a fantastically delightful and heartwarming role player. And today we're going to be covering tactics for anybody out there who wants to fight like her character Yasha from Critical Role.
But let's not waste any more time.
Yasha Nydoorin is a protector Aasimar,
Formerly a fallen Aasimar.
and she grew up with her tribe in Xhorhas.
And she's played by the lovely Ashley Johnson.
Now, according to the Races of Faerun book, the topaz color in Yasha's eyes could indicate that there was a Solar somewhere down her family line.
The purple heterochromia could be a remnant of whatever bad thing caused her to become a fallen Aasimar in the first place.
However, she is now redeemed from being fallen into a protector Aasimar.
Aasimar are celestial-blooded creatures, much like how a tiefling comes from an infernal or demonic background.
Or how Genasi have elemental sides.
Now, with barbarians, people can be tempted to pick them thinking they are a simple class to play.
But barbarians are deceptively more complicated in their tactics for combat than you would give them credit for.
Now, Ashley Johnson is an amazing role player, but sometimes we can see she gets flustered and not sure what to do in combat.
Right, as we all do sometimes.
So here is our main tips and tactics for how to play a Zealot Barbarian.
Right, and we want to preface this by saying that we believe that the absolute perfect way to play Yasha is however Ashley Johnson wants to play her.
Yasha is her character. However she chooses to play her is exactly right.
Right, we're just offering lighthearted tips and tactics that could help streamline combat and take a little bit of the confusion and frustration about what do I do when combat starts.
Ashley, we think you're amazing.
Good job.
Now, unless you wish to get bogged down in combat, you will need to develop your skills in making decisions on the fly.
Right, and one easy way to do this without getting flustered or confused or overwhelmed is to distinguish between standing decisions and situational decisions.
Standing decisions are choices you decide make sense for your character most of the time, and they will tend to define your play style.
Right, you make these decisions for your character way ahead of time, and they dictate how you would handle things in combat. It's a way to free up your cognitive candle power for when you're actually in the thick of it.
And these decisions will evolve and change as your character levels up.
Now, the second thing would be a situational decision. These are things that happen that you need to react to that you really can't plan for ahead of time.
However, you can decide the criteria for solving these situational decisions ahead of time.
Luckily enough, Ashley's character, Yasha, is a Zealot Barbarian. Their features are generally uncomplicated and pretty intuitive to use.
And they only give you an incentive to do what you were going to do anyways.
Right, they don't really add much in the way of decision making.
But let's discuss their ability profile.
Right, for a barbarian, more specifically, a Zealot Barbarian. Now, we've covered barbarians on this channel before. If we can, we'll put a link up here or down in the description to that video so you can get more of an all-encompassing idea. In that one, we covered a Totem Barbarian, and by comparison, a Zealot Barbarian is quite a bit simpler.
Many of the Zealot Barbarian subclass features only emphasize or enhance what you were going to do in combat anyway. And a Zealot is set up as an amazing tank.
And if you look at how Ashley set up Yasha, you can see that she fits a tank profile pretty well.
For a barbarian, barbarians are natural tanks, but they can be built up as a hit-and-run DPS fighter.
Tanks are stationary weapon users who defend themselves by absorbing damage in combat rather than avoiding it.
At level 1, a barbarian gets Rage.
I would like to rage.
This is their defining feature.
With Rage, you get resistance to physical damage, advantage on strength checks and saving throws, and you deal additional damage with any strength-based melee weapon hit, so long as you're raging.
However, you can only rage twice per long rest.
which means during an average adventuring day, which would consist of 6 encounters and 2 short rests between your long rests, you're going to want to use your rage ideally once every 3 encounters at low levels.
But in practicality, this isn't how it works.
Right. With regards to a standard adventuring day, when the developers did a survey, they actually found out that a real standard adventuring day turns out to be 1 encounter and then 1 long rest.
This means that, practically, you should be using your rage ability every combat encounter.
Exactly. The days where you'll have 6 combat encounters and then 2 short rests are really more indicative of combat encounter heavy dungeon crawls.
So if you're not in one of those, feel free to use all your abilities.
Right, there's no point in saving this for later because you're just going to have the 1 encounter and then a long rest anyway. You'll get it back.
For their primary offensive ability, Barbarians should almost always choose Strength.
Right, this is because the bonus damage that they get from their rage ability doesn't apply to finesse or ranged weapon attacks.
This makes Dexterity a less ideal choice.
And it's not that you can't build a Dex Barbarian, they're just losing out a little bit.
For their primary defensive ability, Constitution is what a Barbarian would typically take. It makes them more tanky.
Right, but not always. Because Barbarians have a full D12 for their hit points, it's kind of like getting an extra 2 points of Constitution modifier added to your hit points. This means that it's okay if they make Constitution their 3rd highest stat, and instead choose, say, Dexterity as their primary defensive ability.
And if you look, this is what Ashley Johnson did for Yasha.
And Dexterity and Constitution both contribute to their unarmored defense ability.
Barbarians can wear medium armor, but they also have an unarmored defense feature, similar to a monk.
Right, but unlike a monk, a barbarian can still use a shield with its unarmored defense.
Typically, if your unarmored defense isn't 18 or higher, you're probably better off wearing the medium armor half plate.
In fact, if you look at Yasha at her current level with the items she has on her, if she started using half plate, her armor class wouldn't change and would actually free up an attunement slot because she wouldn't be able to use her bracers of defense anymore.
At 2nd level, a Barbarian gains Reckless Attack.
Reckless Attack grants you advantage on all strength-based melee weapon attacks on your turn. In exchange, you grant advantage to all attacks against you until the start of your next turn.
This is the ultimate risk versus reward ability.
Right, this is useful for dropping less powerful enemies very quickly.
Or if you wish to draw your enemy's attention to yourself, say away from your squishier, badly injured allies.
Right, using Reckless Attack and granting advantage to all the enemies is a big incentive to make them attack you. Essentially, this is your taunt ability if you were in an MMO.
Reckless Attack is also a fantastic way to counter disadvantage.
Right, if you have disadvantage for, say, being blinded, or attacking an invisible creature, or being in darkness, then Reckless Attack can counter that.
This is important to note, and it sets up our first standing decisions.
Right, your standing decision for Reckless Attack. Use it if you want to drop an enemy quickly, if you need to counter disadvantage, or if you want to taunt or entice enemy creatures to attack you over, say, your other allies.
You know, like a tank. And as a situational decision to keep in mind, you should only use Reckless Attack if you will get to make at least as many attacks on your turn as all the opponents attacking you will get to make on their turns combined.
Right. To make a much simpler version of that, it basically means don't use Reckless Attack if you're surrounded by more than 2 enemy creatures.
That'll work.
Now, as a tank, your main job is to engage with the bulk of the melee combatants and occupy their attention on you away from your allies.
Tanks are designed to absorb damage, and they're able to take more hits than any of the other characters.
Right, if another one of your allies took the hits that the tank was meant to take, it would more than likely kill them right out.
Whereas the tank will probably be fine.
Right, but also, you need to be able to do enough meaningful damage in combat so that the enemies don't simply ignore you.
Doing damage is another way to entice enemies to attack you.
And with a Barbarian, they absorb the damage by effectively doubling their hit points with their rage ability.
Whereas a fighter absorbs damage using his armor class.
So, as a Barbarian in general, at the start of combat, you're going to use your movement, which has been increased due to your Barbarian class features, to engage with the bulk of the melee combatants or the big bad evil guy.
whichever is going to be more useful in combat for your party.
But generally, if you just jump into the bulk of the melee combatants, you're probably fine.
But let's be more specific. Let's talk about Yasha and the path of the Zealot Barbarian.
Right. In addition to the Barbarian chassis, the Zealot subclass adds a lot of really cool features.
The features are generally simple and intuitive and quite fun to use.
And they don't really require much in the way of extra decision making.
At level 3, you gain Divine Fury and Warrior of the Gods.
Divine Fury gives you additional damage to deal against the first creature you hit in melee combat.
Warrior of the Gods removes the component cost for spells that can bring you back from the dead.
Right, but not into undeath.
So spells like Revivify, you wouldn't need the 300 gold piece diamond to do it.
Now, throughout the campaign, Yasha has been roleplayed as being very socially awkward. And she rarely speaks unless spoken to. She's often abrupt and blunt with strangers, and she can be shown to get a little nervous or even fidgety if too much attention is focused on her alone.
Like somebody I know.
Right, but this is actually an awesome juxtaposition of role-playing a personality versus character class.
A Zealot Barbarian is the last person who should be timid in combat.
Right, this is because they have very little fear of actual death.
All it would cost a cleric to bring them back from death is a spell slot.
And Zealot Barbarians should act like they have no fear of death.
Similar to the Berserker Ragers in Viking mythology.
Or traditional samurai warriors.
Yasha should be front and center, demanding attention and commanding the way combat proceeds.
Right, and since Zealot Barbarians have so little to fear from actual death, they should have no problem attacking giant mobs, or the big bad evil guy creature, or whatever else you want to throw at them.
Now this sets up our next standing decision. Zealot Barbarians should fight like they have no fear of death.
Right, so at the start of every combat, you are going to rage.
If you can, try to rage right before the initiative is rolled, so that you can save your bonus action for your zealous presence.
Right, and we're going to cover that in a sec.
Next, you should reckless attack as much as possible.
Right, and following the criteria from before, recklessly attack to kill creatures quickly, to counter disadvantage, and to taunt enemies to attacking you over your squishier allies.
Don't recklessly attack when you're surrounded in melee.
At level 6, a Zealot Barbarian gains Fanatical Focus.
Once per rage, you can re-roll a failed saving throw, but you must use the new roll.
Now, this is a fantastic ability, and because it recharges on a rage, then you should never ever save this for later. If you fail a saving throw, use this instantly.
This can help protect you against spells that can end your rage, like Hold Person, Polymorph, and Banishment.
Right, and this also applies to things like death saving throws and concentration saves.
This is your next standing decision. Anytime you fail a saving throw while raging, use this ability.
At level 10, they get Zealous Presence.
Once per long rest as a bonus action, you can unleash a battle cry.
Right, this battle cry lets up to 10 creatures of your choice,
which can include yourself,
have advantage on all attacks and saving throws until the start of your next turn.
This is amazing, but it's important to note to not use reckless attack when this ability is up.
Right, because it wouldn't do anything besides give everybody advantage against you.
Now, this competes with your bonus action for your rage.
Right, and given the choice, if you have this ability and rage both available, use this one first.
In fact, make this the first thing you do in your first round of combat.
Right. That's because there's always going to be a first round of combat. There's not always guaranteed to be a second or a third.
Using it first will give you and your allies the most advantage from this ability.
Right, and in this case, you would then rage on your next round of combat if you weren't able to rage before combat started.
It's important to remember that you have to attack a hostile creature before your turn ends, or be attacked by one, so you don't lose your rage. In this case, we would recommend carrying hand axes or javelins on your person to throw at enemy creatures in case you can't get close enough.
Right, so these are your next standing decisions. Use Zealous Presence as the first thing you do in combat, and be sure to carry some kind of ranged weapon on your person in case none of the creatures are within your melee range and you still need to attack something.
So that you don't lose your rage.
Now, remember what we said before about the standard adventuring day? If you're only going to have one combat encounter and then a long rest, then use this ability.
But if you're in an encounter-heavy dungeon, then maybe save this ability for when you know you're at the big bad guy.
Right, it's a judgment call. But generally, if you're not doing a dungeon crawl, you're probably fine using this ability every combat encounter.
Level 14, the Zealot Barbarian gains Rage Beyond Death.
While raging, having 0 hit points does not make you unconscious.
You still have to make death-saving throws, and you suffer the normal effects of taking damage while at 0 hit points.
But if you would die due to failing death-saving throws, you don't die until the rage ends.
And even then, you only die if you're still at 0 hit points.
This is your Endless Rage ability. While you're raging, being reduced to 0 hit points and failing all your death-saving throws doesn't kill you.
Now this doesn't make you unkillable. It just means you're going to be very hard to take down. And you still have your Barbarian Rage resistance while this is going on.
This is one of the ultimate tank abilities. So long as you're raging, you can just keep taking damage. But I would suggest that you keep at least a healing potion or a good berry on your person so that at the end of combat, you can take that before your rage ends and you don't die.
But even if you do die, who cares? It will cost your cleric nothing but a spell slot to bring you back from the dead.
And at 13th level, Yasha's going to get this next level.
But let's discuss tactics for Yasha specifically.
Now, Yasha comes across as timid and non-confrontational. That's awesome for a roleplay, but it's also cool because Yasha's one of the last people who needs to be timid in combat.
She should be leading combat, and she has very little to fear from death and should fight like it.
Now, at the start of combat, Yasha should roll initiative with advantage because she's a barbarian.
Going first is important. It allows you to dictate how combat proceeds when you're the tank.
And then she should run forward using her 50 speed of movement to engage with the bulk of the melee combatants.
Now, Yasha has the Sentinel Feet. This is a fantastic tank ability. If you look at the last benefit of this feat, it makes it a good idea to position yourself 10 feet away from an ally who is also engaged in melee, but doesn't possess this feat. If you don't, you're not taking advantage of all the potential enhancement to your action economy you could be.
Right, so in the Mighty Nine, she shouldn't do this with Bo, but doing it with somebody else like Ford or not would be a good idea.
In the first round of combat, Yasha should battle cry using her bonus action.
We mean Zealot's presence, but it's basically a battle cry.
Then move her 50 feet to engage with the bulk of the melee combatants.
Or the big bad evil guy.
Then attack, and don't forget to use your Divine Fury for the first hit.
And because Yasha's also a protector Aasimar, she gets an ability called Radiant Soul.
This allows her to fly for 1 minute, but it also lets her deal additional radiant damage to one target on her turn.
Right, and generally this should be done against the same target that she did her Divine Fury against.
With just those 2 abilities, Yasha deals an additional 1d6 plus 19 radiant damage to the first creature she hits in combat.
Right, and don't forget to use your reckless attack if it's applicable.
Generally, you can rinse and repeat this. On the second round of combat, if Yasha hasn't raged, then she should use her bonus action to rage first.
Right, she should still be engaged in melee combat with the bulk of the enemy combatants, so rage first to get the benefit, and then use your attack.
As a tank, you really shouldn't move around that much. It makes it more difficult for your party to adjust their positioning around you.
Right, most of the other combat classes position themselves based on where the tank is, and if you move around too much, it makes their job a lot harder.
So another situational decision. In combat as a tank, stay put.
Right, as much as you reasonably can.
And that's it. Generally rinse and repeat these tactics.
Right. Engage the bulk of the melee combatants, use reckless attack when it's applicable, don't move around too much, and rage.
But let's cover her feats.
Right, we already covered that she has the Sentinel Feet, which she can use in combat to help decide where she's going to position herself. But Yasha also has the Mobile Feat.
Honestly, this isn't the best feat for a tank.
Right, but if you want to dabble a little bit as a hit-and-run damage dealer, then this is a great ability.
It also lets you to attack while you're moving, and continue to move without suffering any opportunity attacks.
That would be great if you were trying to blow through a line of enemy combatants to reach either the big bad evil guy or something behind them.
Still, given the option, we would swap this feat out.
Right. we would probably swap this feat out for something like a stat bonus to her strength, or for another feat like Great Weapon Master.
It's not a bad feat, and it can be lots of fun. There's just better options for a tank.
And as her third feat, Yasha also has the Savage Attacker feat.
Once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee weapon attack, you can re-roll that weapon's damage dice and use either total.
This is a great way to ensure you're going to be doing significant damage. Now, when should you re-roll this damage? Answer: always.
According to Jeremy Crawford, the intent of this feat is to re-roll only the damage from the weapon itself.
Right, for Yasha that means the 2d6 damage she does with her greatsword.
Since Yasha has the extra attack class feature that lets her make 2 attacks with an action, we say to always re-roll the damage from the second hit.
Right, that is unless your first hit deals less than half of its potential damage.
So if you roll less than 6 on your greatsword damage, re-roll the first one. Otherwise, re-roll your second damage.
And you should always re-roll the damage from any time you can only make 1 attack, like on an opportunity attack.
It's always worth it just to pick the higher of the 2 damages.
I suppose unless you already rolled maximum damage.
Now for feat suggestions, we already covered Great Weapon Master.
This is one of our personal favorite feats.
And it would make an excellent addition to Yasha, should she choose to have it in the future.
Basically, you take a -5 to hit and you can add 10 to your damage.
Sounds simple, but when should you take that -5?
Well, lucky for you, we've prayed to the math gods.
Rachel Riley.
And we're going to solve this using the amazing power of algebra.
Take 16 plus your attack modifier, and from that, subtract half the average damage from your heavy weapon.
Right, and keep the result somewhere handy.
So, with Yasha, her attack modifier is +10 with Magician's Judge or Skin Gorger. And she deals 12 damage on average.
2d6 plus 5 damage, that averages out to 12.
So that means she should take the -5 to her attacks, only if the enemy's AC is less than 20.
Right, and if she's raging, that would increase her damage, so it actually makes it so that she should use this ability if their AC is less than 18. And if Yasha has advantage on her hit, it gets even simpler.
If Yasha has advantage, say from Reckless Attack, she should take the -5 to hit if the creature's AC is less than 14 plus her attack modifier.
Right, and in Yasha's case, that would mean it's 24.
But never use this ability if you're able to kill a creature with 1 normal hit.
Right, but let's see what the future holds for Yasha. Should she look at multi-classing?
We've heard that Ashley expressed interest in Yasha maybe becoming a bard.
Unfortunately, with her stats the way they are, that's not really possible.
Currently, she only qualifies to multi-class into fighter or rogue. Multi-classing into any class that has a charisma requirement for Yasha, short of a wish, is going to be infeasible.
Right, Yasha would need 5 additional points into her charisma to be able to do this.
Sorry.
But Rogue and Fighter can add some interesting options into a Barbarian.
Cutting action and action surge can really help a Barbarian out.
Right, but adding those multi-classes really wouldn't benefit you much more than just staying a straight Barbarian the whole way through either.
So do what you like.
And that's about it. This should get you started using tactics for a Zealot Barbarian in your 5th edition game.
And if you wish to fight like Yasha, or if you actually are Yasha, we hope these lighthearted tips and tactics help you out to make the game more fun and more streamlined.
And we would love to thank Ashley Johnson for playing a wonderfully, delightfully flawed and amazing Barbarian character and showing us exactly how varied and different Barbarians can be from each other.
Just look at the difference between Yasha and Grog.
Right. Both awesome for different reasons. But as always, we hope you're having fun. We love you all. Remember to be nice to each other, and is it time for school yet?
Bye!
Yeah, 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 yeah.